Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to another edition of Community Talk. I'm one of your co-hosts, Bhagwant Singh.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh, and I'm your other co-host, Martin Singh. It's a pleasure to be with you here again.
Martin, on our way into today's show, right, we had actually decided upon some other topics.
Correct.
But as soon as we sort of met each other in the car park, the first thing we said was Brexit exit.
Exactly. Well, and it was hugely surprising, right? You know, for myself and others. I mean, of course, you know, we're watching it, you know, not directly and not as intensely as folks in the UK, but certainly we had our eye on what was going on over there.
I mean, I obviously, as you all know, I lived in the UK for most of my life. I've been here 10 years. And so I was very emotional about how things, but I do want to get a perspective from yourself as a Canadian, like born and brought up in Canada.
Yeah.
Who probably less of an emotional but more an objective stance.
Sure.
Right. What is your view on Brexit? Was it a good from a financial perspective, for example?
Sure.
Was it a good move on part of the UK, or was it not such a good move?
So the thing that I found surprising, first of all, was when they were interviewing folks who were supporting the exit or the leave vote. What I found surprising is that a lot of the reasoning that was provided actually had nothing to do with what the impact of the vote would be. Meaning that there were people who were saying that they were voting to leave because they were upset with one aspect or another of the European Union, when in fact voting to leave would not impact that particular aspect. So I think one of the examples that was provided was the European Court. The people were upset with that, and so they wanted to vote to leave. But voting to leave the European Union doesn't have Britain leave from the European Court, as it were, right? And so what happens then is that people effectively voted to leave, and they're not going to get what they want as a result of their leave vote. And so for me to have folks, you know, take such a huge decision based on what amounts to misinformation, either on their own part or on the part of others, sharing it with them was you know, really, really surprising.
As a Canadian, and you're a businessman who obviously invests in throughout the different provinces in Canada, what's your view as in terms of if you wanted to invest in the UK, for example?
Sure.
Would you invest in the UK or in London or Paris now?
Yeah. Well, historically, of course, we would always look to the UK.
Only part of Canada, not always.
No, true. But I mean, still, a large part of Canada is, of course, English speaking, right? And in addition to that, we have the same common law system, relatively similar, you know, political system, and so there's a lot of similarities, and so there's a huge comfort level, you know, that would exist. That being said, you know, business being business, are you going to go to the market that now is the size of the UK and may in a year or 2 years be even smaller than that should Scotland choose to pick up and leave? Or are you going to go to mainland Europe, where again a lot of people already speak English as well, but also too, you know, we have the advantage here in Canada at least of having a huge French-speaking population. Again, that you know, we understand, or we have lawyers that understand the civil law or the Napoleonic law code that exists both here in Quebec in Canada and, you know, also over in France. And so, you know, if you're a business person looking for the largest market, for us here in Canada, after the United States, of course, you'd be, you know, looking, if you're looking, you know, across the Atlantic, you'd be looking at continental Europe as opposed to the UK.
I mean, obviously the decision's made and the British public, people have spoken and so on and so forth, but I do want to look a little bit about the polarization of British politics and compare it to Canada.
Sure.
Obviously David Cameron resigned. There's going to be all sorts of speculation. The pundits are saying that the Tory party is going to probably move to the right. At the moment you have Jeremy Corbyn, who is a leader of the Labour Party, who is more left than what traditional leaders of the Labour Party have been. So whereas if you contrast that with Canada, there's not this left-right, or not such a sharp contrast in left and right politics, is there?
Not in federal. The thing is this, is that if you look historically around the world, Commonwealth countries, either at the federal level or lower than that, historically what has typically happened is that the central party, as it were, which for us here in Canada, would be the Liberal Party, has traditionally, dropped out. It hasn't happened here federally. It has happened at some of the provincial levels, meaning, for example, in the province of Saskatchewan, there is really effectively no provincial Liberal Party. Similarly, in Manitoba, there's no provincial, Liberal Party there either, for all intents and purposes. And so what you have, I wouldn't say it's, as stark, the difference that exists in the UK, but you have more of a left-right, conversation that exists there than you do, for example, at the federal level. I mean, even, for example, in British Columbia, which is being led by the Liberal Party, the Liberal Party there is a Liberal in name only. It's only because the Social Credit, which was really a right-wing party, burnt themselves up in an election, some years back, and they couldn't use the word liberal anymore. And so even there, if you were to look at it from a philosophical base, you have, that right-left polarization that exists. But again, nowhere near close as what you have going on in the UK currently.
The debate centered around immigration, or a lot of the EU debate that centered around immigration, rightly or wrongly. Mm-hmm. I will contrast this with Canadian elections. I mean, there's one of the Sikh channels I was watching. One of the pundits, as it were, said that it seems to be, I've been here since 1955. Mm-hmm. And he's a professor, and he goes, since 1955, every election's about immigration, right? So this thing of literal England and so on and so forth. Compare that with Canadian politics, right? Mm-hmm. Is there such a strong or such a predominant debate about immigration in Canadian politics?
Immigration is certainly an issue, but it's an issue differently, right? Canadian, a lot of Canadians, certainly not all of them, but a lot of Canadians see Canada as a safe haven, where people come from other parts of the world to build a new life, to escape, whatever hardship it is. I mean, for me, the most, memorable ones, certainly when people from our own community were escaping, coming here to Canada as refugees, from India and whatnot. But the Vietnamese boat people, would have been the single largest one that I can remember in my memory, outside of the current Syrian refugee settlement that has been done. And in addition to that, what happens is that the Canadian viewpoint, provided by the government and also supported by the general populace in terms of providing, their votes and support to whoever the governing party is, has, typically been very supportive of immigrants, making sure that they have the healthcare coverage and whatnot and other resources to be available so that when they come here, they have the tools that they need to successfully integrate with the rest of society.
So, I've been watching not just Facebook, social media, and obviously we get all the from the UK channels, we get the BBC News, and there is a lot of hostility, or anti-immigrant feeling, and that's partly drives the vote. But living there and here, I don't feel that here so much. When the narrative here is not about, oh my God, this country is going to be full up and it's going to sink. Right. it is, our small towns are dying, mm-hmm. right? We need to, invigorate the economy and bring in good skilled immigrants to this country. Mm-hmm. Where it's, and the debate in the UK, from what I could understand from family, friends, and obviously the media is, oh my God, the country's going to die. Oh, there's too many Polish are coming in, too many of XYZ, too many Europeans coming in. Why do you think there's this difference in the narrative of both essentially English-speaking countries? Mm-hmm.
Well, I think what it is here in Canada, we've done a very good job of making sure that immigrants have what they need in order to be able to become successful and contribute positively to the economy. And as a result of that, those provinces that have received a disproportionately large number of immigrants in the past understand, full well the contributions that these immigrant communities make and appreciate them. And then for those provinces who have received disproportionately less, meaning like my own home province of Nova Scotia and the other provinces on the East Coast, they're suffering from a lack of population. And so they need immigrants to come in, and for a simple fact, to maintain the economy, where it is currently, or even to bring it back to where it was a few years ago. To give you some kind of perspective, in Nova Scotia, I believe it was 2 or 3 years ago, they had as many students enrolled for school then in that particular year as they did in the 1930s.
Right.
You know, and 1930s was not yesterday, right? You know, that was some years ago. And so there's an understanding. In fact, there is a report that was chaired by Mr. Ivany, president of Acadia University in Nova Scotia, a very prestigious university, not just in Eastern Canada, but across Canada, has a very good name. And in that Ivany report, he said that, you know, Nova Scotia needs immigrants, right? And they need them now. And so what you have is that you have at the political level a recognition, you have at the academic, you know, higher level economic, financial sector level that there's a recognition. And then also too, throughout, you know, the schooling systems and whatnot. And I mean, you know, schools are being shut down due to a lack of population in some parts of the country.
We'll take you to your role as a businessman.
Sure.
And it's similar to the question I asked previously, but as a businessman, what do you see the effect of what's happened?
So people get really worried about, you know, the immediate effect, meaning that, you know, British pound, which is typically, you know, a very, very strong solid currency, dropping, I believe, the value down to the same value that it had in the early 1980s or something to that effect. I think that there is going to be some volatility in the market. I don't think it's going to last as long as some people say. But I think the challenge that the folks, or, you know, the good folks in the UK are going to have is that when it comes to its steady state, at the end of the volatility, that steady state will be at a lower level than what it had been previously. In addition, the growth from that steady state, you know, onward will be at a lower rate.
Right. Just coming back to our community, my understanding, and I know you're involved in community work as well, in the Sikh community here, and is the UK Sikhs have sort of provided leadership to the European Sikhs. Now with this move, with the exit move out of Europe, the same sort of clout is not going to be, the UK Sikhs are not going to have the same sort of clout that they can put pressure on their European MEPs on Sikh issues in, say, Italy, Germany, and so on and so forth, where the community is a lot newer than the UK Sikh community, which is quite matured, like the Canadian Sikh community.
I would even say even in some ways more mature, right? You know, I would say, for example, here in Canada, certainly the folks out on the West Coast have been, you know, in Canada as long as the various British Sikhs and whatnot have been in the UK. But beyond that, you know, everyone else is really newer, you know, in terms of the years that they've been here on the ground.
So how do you see this affecting the Sikh community in Europe itself?
Yeah, I say that it would have to be viewed as a net loss, really. I mean, you know, I'm not so sure that there's necessarily any, you know, financial support that would have been going back and forth there, but certainly in terms of being a voice, you know, a solid, you know, allied voice talking from across the channel, as it were, that's now been lost, you know, and I think that that's a tragedy, particularly given the differences that exist, the stark differences that exist, and how Sikh people are treated in different European countries. I mean, you know, England and France are geographically not that far away from each other, but Sikh people in France don't enjoy half of the rights and privileges that the Sikh folks in the UK do. And so now what has happened with the vote, you have, you know, the rise of folks like Marine Le Pen, you know, advocating for her, I think she's quoting it as the Frexit, you know, and this does not, you know, bode well for us at all, quite frankly.
And within Europe, within England itself, I mean, I sort of echo that. You got Nigel Farage. I mean, Prime Minister Farage. I mean, for our viewers in the UK, think of a Prime Minister Farage and how welcoming that would be. So, and it seems to be that it's the that sort of political element that has risen on this. Though there was some case to be said, though, the way that Greece was treated in terms of its austerity. When they were bailed out by basically the European Union.
Correct.
But the way the Greek sort of parliamentary or the will of the Greek people was treated is they were steamrolled.
Yeah.
So the European Union wasn't exactly perfect, but those issues will never seem to be brought to light in this vote. It always seemed to be about an immigration and being run over by foreigners.
Correct.
Right. And
Well, and I think another important thing, I mean, we talk about UK divided in a whole number of different ways, meaning, overwhelming majority of folks from Scotland voting in favour of staying with the EU. I believe Northern Ireland was in much the same way. And then you had, of course, a majority of folks from England, voting to leave. But there's also a demographic split that exists there as well, whereby you have younger folks who voted to stay overwhelmingly with the EU, and then the older folks are voting to leave. There's going to be political repercussions to come of that, because those younger folks are going to be around for a lot longer than the folks who had voted to leave the EU.
Do you see an economic union between Canada and America of the same sort of way that the European Union works?
Yeah, certainly I would say it's even more integrated,
NAFTA.
Yeah, absolutely. NAFTA includes not just the United States, but it includes Mexico as well. It's longer standing, and it's gone through, 2 iterations really. And so, yeah, I mean, let's just put that way. Could you imagine, Canada really stepping out of that particular relationship? It would be, catastrophic bad, for us. And so I hope, for our brothers and sisters in the UK, that the same type of, impact won't, fall on their shoulders as a result of this decision that they've made.
Yeah, and in terms of the immigration debate, there's one thing that I raise with you and really like your thoughts on is, now that we dealt with the Polish, someone had written somewhere, now we dealt with the Polish, now we're going to deal with the blacks, i.e. people like ourselves.
That's it. For all, people of color or who are distinct minorities, the difficulty with hate is that it's very easily turned from one group to another. And that's exactly what, the folks in right-wing politics do. Because, how shall I put it? They will not point the fingers at themselves when the economy starts to, suffer, right? And unemployment starts to go up. This particular vote will have a negative economic impact on the UK. It's unavoidable. The final absolute magnitude of that, I'd say currently is unknown. But the people who voted to leave aren't going to, look at themselves and say, geez, we were responsible for this. They're going to look for the scapegoats. And as you quite rightly mentioned, previously it would have been, Eastern Europeans, bearing the brunt of that discrimination and whatnot. But yeah, once, they're being, forced out or kept out or whatever the case may be, they will, turn their eyes differently, and look back on us as the scapegoat for that hatred.
And what do you think can be done about that?
I'm not so sure that anything can be done about it, quite frankly. I mean, the solution, ultimately to, positive integration is to ensure that there's economic opportunities for all folks, to be available, and to make sure that people from all communities have access to them. Hard to do in a shrinking economy.
Today when I was driving, I've been here since 2007. I've mentioned a number of times on the show, and every week I had a thought: did I make the right move coming to Canada to live on a permanent basis, me and my family? Every week it'd be a passing thought in my mind: should I have stayed in England, in London?
Well, and we should state for people that you were well settled there.
I was well settled.
You had a job, and you're
everything.
You're fully set up.
Fully set up. I mean, I moved for family reasons here, but fully set up, and it was always double-minded about whether I should have stayed or whether. And many people come to Canada. Actually, maybe we'll do a show on this one time, about moving, because you moved,
sure,
and I've moved here to Toronto.
So, correct.
Right, but many people come to Canada from the UK, and they last about 2-3 years, and they say, no, we're going to go back. And I've been here 10 years, and I still sometimes think, should I have gone back? But since this Brexit vote, I think I feel at this moment in time that probably I'm better off in Canada than the UK. This is the first time I'm saying this. Actually, the first time I've actually felt that I'm actually better off, and it probably, God, as it were, made the right decision for me to actually stay here, because I think the hostility and the repercussions of this is going to fall onto the likes of us, because the Europeans are dealt with, inverted commas. Now it's our turn. right? Because they need a scapegoat. The economy is going to is not going to do great.
That's correct.
And the easiest scapegoat is the visible minority.
That's it.
And because Canada is very different. Very different. The demographics are probably London and Toronto. They're both very diverse cities, but just the need for people in Canada, whereas it's a different economy in the UK. The need for people, we're a country, the second largest in the world. I'm not sure.
Geographically, we are
the second largest country in the world, and there's only half the population of the UK.
correct.
And this province of Ontario that we are in is the size of the UK. It's bigger.
I dare say it's much larger.
It's
than the UK.
it's larger than the UK.
Yeah.
Right. And so though things have not been perfect here, we'll talk about that in another show. There is a safety level here that's not in the UK, and so it'd be very interesting for our viewers in the UK to see how they react and what's their views, and it'd be good to hear from our viewers on what their views are on the Brexit, because I'm not sure the community was either united one way or the other. It wasn't as if the Sikh community was voted overwhelmingly to remain or leave.
Correct.
So I think just like the rest of the country, where it's 52 to 48%,
Correct.
the Sikh community was, it was divided vote. Now I'd be interested to see if the statistics do come out on which way it went. But if people have views on this, then please use our telephone number and our email address. We would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what your views are on this topic.
Oh, and on top of that too, there will be other Sikhs from the UK that have moved to Canada as well. I mean, I was very interested to hear what you had to say. And surprised, that single vote had that kind of an impact. And so, you're an intelligent fella, so undoubtedly you're not alone in making those kinds of considerations. And so, yeah, we know that there's a whole group of UK born and UK raised Sikhs that live here in the GTA, and they get together, and so to have feedback from that crew as well, about what their thoughts are and the impact of this vote on decisions that they've made previously or decisions that they were going to make in the future would be really quite insightful.
I mean, on that topic, I think on that note, as it were, where we're welcoming your feedback on some of the issues that we raise. I think that's our time for this week, and until next week.
It's always a pleasure. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.